Hello and welcome to the final video in this Java series for beginners. In this video we're going to be introducing one or two new concepts and then we're going to be building a text-based game using all the stuff we've learned so far. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to create two objects. Now objects are a new concept, I haven't discussed them yet at all. We can look at them more in depth in further series, but for now, all we need to know is some basic things about them, which I'm going to explain along the way. So the first thing we need to do for our game is be able to handle user input. So let's go ahead and make a comment here. This is going to be by far the most coding we're going to do this series because it's actually a whole finished project. So I'm going to go ahead and make a comment here saying system objects. We're going to create two objects here. The first one's going to be something called a scanner. Now, the way we create objects in Java is very similar to the way we create variables. So we go ahead and declare the type of variable / object we want, and then we give it a name. I'm going to call it in for input, and then we can go ahead and say equals, and we can set this equal to a new scanner. And then I'm going to go ahead and open and close brackets here, and then a semicolon. So we haven't actually looked at this at all. You're going to notice this is highlighted in red here. It's because it can't find this class. It's not defined anywhere in the packages we've already got. What we need to do is we need to do something called importing. Now, scanner comes with the Java development kit. This is a built-in class that Java has for us. If we go ahead and press Alt and Enter, you can see this first one here, add import for java.util.scanner. If you're not using the same IDE as me, you don't need to press the Alt Enter. You can just go ahead and manually type this in at the top, underneath the package declaration, and before we start the class, you can just go ahead and write import java.util.scanner. So this scanner object here, we're going to go ahead first of all and write system.in. Now this syntax looks quite confusing. If you remember from most tutorials, we use system.out.println. Obviously the out is for output and we can print stuff out with that, but the system.in is actually for input. So if we put this inside the scanner object here, we're going to put this inside the brackets here, and it's basically we're saying use the input from the system in this scanner object, and we can use this and we can use some of the methods it has to help us take input from the user. Now it doesn't really matter if we don't understand the concepts of the object fully yet. We're only using this for input, and it's not super important how it actually works, how the sort of object behind it works. So we're going to go ahead and make another object, and this is pretty much going to be the most confusing part. Random rand. We're going to call it. We're going to make a random object called rand right here. We're going to set it equal to new random, and we don't put anything in the brackets this time. So what a random is, it's a random number generator, and we're going to be using that for part of our game. We can go ahead and hit Alt Enter again and import java.util.random, and again you could do it manually if you don't have that keyboard shortcut. So now that we have these two objects here, again, not super important to know how these work here. All you need to know is we can use this in variable here to get input from the user, and I'll be showing you how to do that. And we can use this rand object here to get random numbers. So again, not super important. Doesn't really matter if you understand the object, how these objects work. So let's go down a couple of lines. We've got our two system objects now, so we can get user input and we can make random numbers. So let's go ahead and make game variables now. So we're going to be making a dungeon type game. We're going to be a hero in a dungeon, and there's going to be enemies, and it's going to be randomly generated combat, and we'll hit them for some damage and they'll hit us for some damage, and we'll basically keep on going until our character's dead. And there'll be some other factors too, like we could use health potions to bring our health back up, and other things like that. So for the game variables, let's go ahead and declare what enemies are going to be in this dungeon first of all. So let's go ahead and make a string array. And this string array is going to hold the names of all the enemies that we're going to make. So let's go ahead and appropriately call this enemies. And then if we remember the way we do arrays, we can put equals and then the spiked brackets. And now we do a comma separated list of enemies. So I'm going to go ahead and write skeleton. I'm going to have a zombie. Going to have a warrior. And an assassin. So you can put more if you want. The way we do the program means that you can add as many of these as you like, because it's going to randomly cycle through all of them and pick one. So now that we have some enemies set up, the names of the enemies, let's go ahead and make a few new variables for these enemies. We're going to go ahead and say int max enemy health. Now, every time we go and attack or go into combat with an enemy, it's going to randomly generate the amount of health they have. And this is going to be the maximum amount of health they can possibly have. So the number's going to be from 0 to this number here. I'm going to go ahead and set this at 75. But again, you can play around with it. You can set these to pretty much any numbers you want. You can see how it works when you change them. The next thing we need is an attack damage for the enemy. We need to know the max attack damage, or the maximum amount of damage an enemy could do to our character when we're going. So let's go ahead and call this enemy attack damage. We can set this to 25, for example. We don't want our character dying too quickly. So now that we've set up the enemies, we can go ahead and say player variables. We're going to set up some player variables here. So first things first, we'll have the health of our character. We can go ahead and set this to 100. Again, you can use whatever values you'd like. We can set our player's attack damage, how much damage we can do to enemies. We can go ahead and be a bit biased here and allow our guy to do more damage to the enemies than they can do to us. Then we'll go ahead and do some more variables. We want to keep fighting as long as possible, so we want our person to be able to heal up. So we're going to make a health potion mechanic. We're going to make it so our enemies are... We're going to make it so our character can have a health potion if he's low on health, and he can go, he can gain some more health stats for that. So we're going to go ahead and write num health pots, and this is going to be the number of health pots that our character starts out with. So again, this is the health our player starts with. This is the attack damage of our player, and this is the amount of health potions that our player will start with. You can go ahead and add comments to the side of each of these if you'd like, so you can easily remember which ones they are. So we need 2 more variables for the health potions. We need to actually give some stats to them. So we can say integer health potion heal amount. So this is the amount of health the potion heals for. I'm going to go set that to 30. Then we can have one final integer. Health potion drop chance. Now this drop chance here, we're going to make a mechanic so every time you kill an enemy, there is a certain percentage chance for them to drop a health potion. I'm going to go ahead and set this to 50%. And I'll just add a comment here to say percentage, because it may not be obvious. So this 50 here means 50% chance to drop a health potion. Again, play around with these numbers. You can make them whatever you like. This is going to work either way. So now what we need is we need a Boolean variable. We're going to call this running. I'm going to set it equal to true. Now this running variable is going to be part of a while loop. It's going to be the condition for a while loop. So the game is going to keep iterating over and over until we tell it to stop, or until some conditions are met so that the game has to stop. So we're going to go ahead and add a system out print line here. And we're going to give a welcome message for the game. So we can say, welcome to the dungeon. And this is the start of our game right here. We're going to go ahead and say while running. And now in this while loop, this is where the whole game happens. Before we go into the while loop though, we're going to add one thing to this while loop, and that is a label. Now we'll see why we need this soon. So I'm going to go ahead and write game and then a colon. So what I've done with this is I have labeled this while loop game. So game is now the name of this while loop, and we're going to be using this label here a bit later so that we can tell our program to iterate back to the start of this while loop here. That's why we need this label right here. So now that we've done that, there's going to be a lot of system out print lines in this program right here. Just because it's a text-based game, there has to be loads of text printed out to the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste something I already have. And that is a system out print line with just a lot of dashes in it, like right here. And I'm going to keep this copy and pasted because this is going to be a set This is going to be a kind of separator, like an amount of dashes that we're going to use. So now let's go ahead and move down in the while loop. The first thing we need to do is start combat with an enemy. The first thing we're going to do is find an enemy, set up the stats for it, and then start combat with it. So let's go ahead and say int enemy health. Now, if you remember up here, we set a variable called maximum enemy health, and this is the maximum amount of health an enemy can have, but it can't have more than this, but it can have less because we don't want it to be the flat 75 the whole time. So we're going to go ahead and set the value of the enemy health each time, because again, it's going to be random. And we're going to set this equal to rand, which is the random object we have here. And I'm going to show you the methods we use now. We can go ahead and put the full stop. And then you'll see there's a lot of methods here. We're going to use this one here called nextInt, and it takes one parameter. So this parameter is the maximum value that this random integer can be. So the integer that is generated is going to be between 0 and the number given. And the number we're going to give is our variable right here, maximum enemy health. So at the start of every iteration, we're going to set enemy health equal to a random number between 0 and the maximum enemy health. So now we're going to go ahead and set a string called enemy. We need to know which enemy we're fighting. Again, this is going to be randomly generated. It's going to be a random selection from one of these here. So we need to access one of these random names. So we're going to go ahead and say enemies, grab the array, and then do the square brackets. And now, as we've learned, we need to put the index of the array inside the square brackets here. And the index in this case is going to be a random integer between 0 and the length of this array. So by making it between 0 and the length of the array, we're going to generate a number that is either 0, 1, 2, or 3. And it's going to randomly pick one of these each time. So inside the index for the array, we're going to say rand dot nextInt, and then the parameter is going to be enemies dot length. So we're accessing the enemies array here. And then the index we're using is a random integer between 0 and the max length of this array here. So now that we have the name of the enemy, we can go ahead and system.out.println. And I set this up beforehand, so there's going to be so we can actually format the game. It took me a while to format it in the text, obviously because this is a text-based game, all in the output of Java's system.out.println output. It's kind of hard to format it, so I've used lots of separators like this, and I've used tabbing and things like that. So I've set this up already. So if you just copy the way I type it, it should end up looking pretty good. So the first thing we're going to say is which enemy has appeared to our character. So if we go ahead and do a backslash and a T, this is the character for tab in the console. So we're going to tab forwards one, and then we're going to say, we're going to do this hash symbol here, and then a space. Then we're going to say plus enemy, which is the string variable here, the name of the enemy that we've just retrieved. And then we're going to do another plus. We're going to concatenate on, and then just write appeared. And then we're going to do a hash, and then a backslash, and an n. So let's explain what this string is. So first of all, we do a tab, then we do a hash like this, and then we do the name of the enemy, and then appeared, and then another hash, and the backslash n makes sure it moves on to the next line. So it's like a line break. We're moving on to the next line. So if I do a comment here, I'll show you what this would look like as an example. So we'd be tabbed in some, then there'd be a hash, and it would say skeleton has appeared, for example. Like that. And we need to actually add the word has for that. So this is an example of what it would look like in the console. So now that we have the enemy appearing, we need to set another while loop, because we have the while loop for actually running the game. This while loop here is where we grab the enemy and we have it. But then we need another while loop for when we're actually in the combat with the same enemy. We need to keep iterating until this enemy here that we've just set up is dead. We need to make sure this one dies before we move on to the next one. So we're going to go ahead and say while enemy health is greater than 0. So that should be pretty straightforward. The enemy health is this random integer here that we've generated between 0 and the max enemy health. And we're saying whilst the enemy's health is greater than 0, i.e. whilst the enemy is alive, we're going to go ahead and do what we're going to do. So we first need to set up for the user a list of commands that they can use, because the way we're going to be interacting with the user in this game is we're going to be saying which option would you like to pick, and then there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And it's going to have options for each one, and then the user's going to have to input 1, 2, 3, 4, and then hit enter. So that's how the input's going to work in this game. So let's go ahead and say system.out.println. Put some speech marks in there, and I'm going to copy this down 5 times. The keyboard shortcut in NetBeans, at least, for copying lines, if you press Control-Shift and then the down arrow, you can just copy the lines like that. And if not, you can always just highlight and copy-paste as you would normally. So in these 5 system.out.print lines, we're going to go ahead and set up the options. The first thing we're going to do is print out the HP of our character. Each time we fight this enemy, each iteration of combat, I guess you can call it, we want to print out our health, so we know how much health we have left. So we're going to do this /T for a tab. Again, we're tabbing into it a bit, so it's going to look nicely formatted. We're going to go ahead and write your HP, put a colon, and then concatenate on our health value. Then we're going to go ahead and tab. We're going to tab for each one. We're going to concatenate on the enemy, the name of the enemy, and then we're going to add '(s), so it's going to be the enemy's HP, and then we're going to concatenate on the enemy health. And then once we've concatenated on the enemy health, we're going to go ahead and give the option to the user. So we're going to make a line break with this \n, and then we're going to tab in with the \T, and then we're going to say, what would you like to do? And now this is where we present our user with the options. So we're going to go ahead and tab in again, and we're going to give them the option 1 for attack. And I'm just copy the line down once more because we're going to have 3 options. We can have option 2 for drink health potion. And we can have option 3 for run. So we've given 3 options to our character. We can either attack the enemy, drink a health potion, or run away from the enemy. So let's go down here a bit. Now this is where we need to get the input from the user. So this is how you get input from the user using this scanner object here. We're only going to be using this variable in, and it's pretty simple. We're just going to call one method from it, and it's pretty simple. So we're going to say string input. So we're going to get the input of the user. Whatever the user's typed in, we're going to get that input. And we're going to say it's equal to in, which is our scanner object up here, right there. We're going to say in.nextLine. And it's as simple as that. This in.nextLine, it grabs the next line from the console, which is basically, if I run this, I can show you. So you can see our game's already set up, kind of. We're not finished it yet, but you can see welcome to the dungeon, and you can see zombie has appeared. It gives us HP, their HP, what would you like to do? So we're presented with the options, and then we can type in 1, 2, or 3. We're going to add some validation to make sure they've picked a valid option. And basically, when I click 1, and hit, or when I type any input and hit enter, it's basically, after you hit enter, this input here is what this method here returns, this in.nextLine. It returns whatever you type after you press enter. So in this instance, this string here would be stored in input, and then we can do whatever we want with that. So once we have the input, we need to actually see what they want to do. So we're going to go ahead and use some if statements here. We're going to say if input dot equals, and we've seen these string functions. So if input equals 1, we're going to do this, and then we're going to add else if input dot equals 2. We'll do something else, and then else if input dot equals 3. We'll do something else. And then finally, we'll have our final else statement, without the if. So if all else fails, we're going to do this, and this is going to be our validation. So if it's not equal to 1, 2, or 3, the user hasn't typed in anything valid, and we're going to go ahead and just repeat the loop. We're going to go back up to here. So the first thing we have to do for input 1. So input 1 is attacking the enemy. That's what we've offered the user here. So if they press 1, we're going to attack the enemy. Now there's a few things we're going to do for this. We're first going to set up 2 integers. We're going to say integer damage dealt and int damage taken. Now whenever you attack the enemy, you're going to deal some damage to them, and they're going to deal some damage to you. That's how the attack mechanism in this game is going to work. So the damage dealt is going to be equal to rand.nextInt. Again, this method generates a random number between 0 and the number you put between these brackets. So the random damage that we're dealing is going to be between 0 and our attack damage that we have here. Again, you can edit these variables as you wish. So random int attack damage. So we're going to generate a random number between 0 and 50. Now the damage taken is going to be equal to rand.nextInt, and it's going to be pretty much the same thing, except we're going to go for the enemy's attack damage instead of our attack damage. So we've got 2 variables here, damage dealt, damage taken, and they're equal to random numbers between 0 and the values we've set on these variables. So very simple we need to do now. We simply need to take the health, the damage dealt, take that number away from the enemy's health, and damage taken, take that away from our health. We could do that pretty simply. We've seen it before. We can say enemy health minus equals damage dealt, and health minus equals damage taken. So our health variable here, our player's health, we're going to minus the damage taken from it, so our health goes down, and same with the enemy health right here, the one that we set up at the start, which is a random maximum health. We're going to minus it from the damage dealt. So you can see now, whenever the user inputs 1, we're going to minus a random amount of health from the enemy, and then slowly but surely, enemy health will become less than 0, so we'll break out the while loop, and then down here, we're going to add some stuff saying you defeated the enemy. So let's go ahead and add some system out print lines now. Again, I've set this up beforehand, so there's going to be some formatting in it. So we're going to go ahead and tab in, and then do a greater than sign, and then we're going to say you strike the, and then we're going to add on, concatenate on the name of the enemy, and then say 4, and then concatenate on the damage dealt, and then the word damage. So it's basically going to say you strike the enemy, name of the enemy, for X amount of damage, whatever this damage dealt variable was. Then below it, we're going to pretty much do the same thing. We're going to say system.out.println, and we're going to go ahead and tab in with the \t, and then do the greater than sign, and then say you receive, and then concatenate on damage taken in retaliation. So you receive X amount of damage in retaliation. So we've minused the values, we've told the users what value, we've told the player what has happened in the game, and then we're going to go ahead and add a little check here. If we've died and we actually haven't killed the enemy, if the enemy's killed us, we're going to add a little if statement here. We're going to say if our health is less than or equal to 0, or we can simplify it and just say if our health is less than 1. We can say system.out.println and say tab in, do an arrow, and say you have taken too much damage. You have taken too much damage, you are too weak to go on. So this is our little check here for if our health goes, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say break, like so. And this break statement here is going to break us out this while loop. It's going to bring us down here. If I'm correct, yep. Where are my brackets gone? Oh, it's because I've scrolled across. Okay, so here we are. Down here, this is where we're going to set up what happens when you die. It's going to say you have been defeated, blah, 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 whatever. So let's go ahead and finish the other inputs first of all. So for input 2, we're going to drink a health potion. This one's going to be pretty simple. So we're going to say if our number of health potions remember that's a variable up here, how many health potions we have. If the number of health potions is greater than 0, i.e. we have a health potion, then we can go ahead and simply say health plus equals health potion heal amount. So we're going to add on to our health the amount that a health potion heals for. Then we need to minus the health potion from our inventory, so num health potions minus minus. Simply going to -1 from the collection, so to make sure we've actually used it and we're not sort of keeping them and infinitely using them. Then we're going to add a feedback printout to our user so they know what they've done. And again, this is formatted, pre-formatted, so I'm going to say you drink a health potion, healing yourself 4, and then we're going to add on the X amount, the health potion heal amount. Then we can concatenate on a full stop here. Then I'm going to press enter and tab in a bit. We're still in this same system out print line. Just going to tab in, make it look neat. Make sure we have this plus here for concatenating. Just remove the spaces there. So you drink health potion healing yourself 4 X amount. Then on the next line, we're going to go ahead and add \n. That brings it down to the next line. And then \t to tab in. Then we say you now have plus health, so the amount of health we actually have, and then HP. So it says you've healed yourself for X amount, you now have Y amount of health. I'm going to go down once more to the next line. And we're going to say \n for the next line, \t. So new line and then tabbed in. You have, we're going to tell them how many health potions they have left. So num health potions left. And then \n to do a new line. So this is the little feedback information we've given to the user if they use a health potion. We first check if there's a health potion available. We then add the health on, the amount it heals for onto our health. Then we take away 1 from the inventory and we give them this nice feedback here saying you heal for X amount, you now have Y amount of health, and you have Z amount of health potions left. We're going to go ahead and add an else statement as well in case the user doesn't actually have any health potions left. And it's going to be system.out.println. And we're going to say \t for the tab and then the arrow. And we're going to say you have no health potions left. And then I'm going to say defeat enemies for a chance to get one. Because we haven't added it yet, but the mechanic is for when we defeat an enemy, there's going to be a random chance stated here, this percentage chance, random chance for an enemy to drop a health potion. So it's looking pretty, we've got a lot of code going on here. We're going to all go over at the end though, in case you missed anything. So what we're going to do now is in this else if down here, number 3 was run. So our third option was to run. Now in this instance, we're going to give a feedback to the user telling them they run away, and then we're going to reiterate the loop, and that's why we have this game loop here, and I'll explain the reason in just a second. So on this, in the case of the user typing in the number 3, we're going to go ahead and do a system.out.println, and we're going to go ahead and say tab in and say you run away from the, and then add on the name of the enemy. Again, the name of the enemy is still in scope. We declared it all up here, and we're still inside the same while loop, so we can use all these variables up here we still have. So we're using the name of the enemy. So we run away from whatever enemy it was, and we'll concatenate on an exclamation mark at the end there. So now this is where we need the label. We're going to go ahead and use continue. And what continue does is it moves to the next iteration of the loop. It says, okay, ignore everything else below this point. Just go back to the start of the loop. The problem is we're already inside a loop, and we don't want to go back into this one because this is the combat loop where we're fighting the same enemy. We actually want to go one further up, back into the main game loop, so we can generate a new enemy and start the combat again. So this label right here, this game label, we're labeling this while loop here, the main one, we're just labeling it game. So when we come down here, we can say continue and then just put the label game. So if we didn't put the label game in there, we would continue with the loop we're currently in. So we'd come back up to here, and then we wouldn't be running from the enemy, we'd just be refreshing the whole combat cycle, and we'd be offered the same options again. So by saying continue game, we're going to break out of this loop here, and we're going to continue on. It's going to find a new enemy and forget we ever fought this enemy in the first place. So that's why we have that label there. And that's the third option done. So the final else statement, if the user didn't type in 1, 2, or 3, if they typed in random stuff, or they didn't type a valid number, we're just going to give them simple feedback, and we're just going to say tab in and say invalid command. And this is fine to just say this, because basically if we manage to reach this else here and say invalid command, we're going to head, because it's a while loop, nothing happens, so we'll head straight back up to the top. We'll just be offered the options again, so the user has another chance to look at the options they have and then do whatever they want to do. So we've got quite a lot going on here at the moment. So we've started our main loop. We've initialized the enemy we have. We've said whilst the enemy's health is greater than 0, we're going to offer the user these options. Then we're going to go ahead and get their input here. Then we're going to go ahead and say if the input equals 1, if they pick the first one, we're going to go ahead and attack. If it equals 2, we're going to do this. And if it equals 3, we're going to do this. So let's go ahead and come out of this while loop now, just making sure I've got the brackets right here. So the first thing we're going to check for is if, once we're out here, we need to check why we broke out this loop. Did we break out the loop because we defeated an enemy, or did we break out because our health went to 0? So you can see if our health is less than 1, we go ahead and say break. So we've broken out of the loop right here. So the first thing we're going to check for is if our player is dead, we're going to say health is less than 1. And we're going to say system.out.println. And we're going to add a descriptive sentence, such as, you limp out of the dungeon. Weak from battle. So that's the little thing that we do if our health is below 1. We say, you limp out the dungeon, weak from battle, and then we go ahead and break. If I can spell break, there we go. Okay, so break here will break out of the main loop, the while running loop. And then it will come out to down here where we'll add a message at the end saying thanks for playing or something. So first thing we checked, if our health was less than 1, we do the description and break out the loop. If our health wasn't less than 1 and we broke out this loop up here, it must have meant we defeated the enemy. So we still have all the enemy stats up here and its name and stuff, so we can still use them down here. Remember, we've initialized them here, we've done the whole combat loop, and then we've come down here outside of the loop, so we can still use all those variables. So right here, underneath this, we're going to go ahead, I'm going to grab that copy and paste thing I had, which is this separator here. It's just a system out print line with loads of dashes. And again, it's just for formatting purposes. So I'm going to say system.out.println. And we'll be using some hashes for formatting now as well. So we're going to do a hash and concatenate on the name of the enemy, and then concatenate on was defeated. And you'll see when we actually run this how the formatting makes it look. It makes it look nice and neat. We've got all these. We've got the formatting going on. We've got the separators. It makes it nice and easy to read. The code is not as readable, but the actual game for the user is fairly reasonable. So we'll add another print line here. In this line, I didn't explain it, we basically just added that formatting. We said enemy was defeated, so the name of the enemy was defeated. Go ahead and add some more formatting here. We're going to tell them we're going to tell our player how much health they have left. You have health, HP left. So we've told them they defeated the enemy. We've told them how much HP they've left. Now we're going to go ahead and add our random drop chance. So remember, we have a percentage here, health potion drop chance. If we defeat an enemy, we want a 50% chance for them to drop a health potion. Again, you can change this percentage to whatever you want. So the equation we're going to use here is if rand.nextInt, and then we're going to put 100 in, is greater than health pot drop chance. So let me explain this. We're generating a random number between 0 and 100. If the random number is greater than the percentage chance for the drop, and actually it should be less than, not greater than, sorry. So if the number between 0 and 100 is less than the drop chance, it means the random number landed in that area. So it means making the number higher will be more likely. So if I make the drop chance 99%, obviously a random number between 0 and 100 is highly likely to be less than 99, which means that the chance is higher. So I'm going to keep it 50 at the moment, but you can change it whatever you want. And similarly, say I do 10, a random number between 0 and 100 is much more likely to be greater than 10 as opposed to less than 10. So I'll go ahead and change this back to 50. So that's how our percentage drop chance works. So inside the if statement here, we can say num health potions and just say plus plus. We'll add one health potion. Then we'll give feedback to the user. They want to know that they've actually received one. So we'll add our formatting and say the enemy dropped a health potion. Then we'll just do some more useful feedback for the player. We'll just tell them now the total amount of health potions they have after that drop. So you have potions, and it could be ambiguous, so we can just add that brackets S because they could only have one health potion. So we've added one to the health potions. We've given the user feedback. So that's the random drop chance for the health potion. So we've said enemy was defeated, how much health they have left. We've randomized the drop of a health potion and told them if they have received one. Then we're going to go ahead and add a little separator here. And we're going to give the user some more options. We're going to go ahead and say system.out.println. We're going to say, what would you like to do? So we'll have two more options here. We're going to have number 1 as continue fighting. And we're going to have number 2 as exit dungeon. So after every time we defeat an enemy, we're going to be presented with these two options. Do we want to fight another enemy, or do we want to exit the dungeon? So let's go ahead and do the same thing we did above. We're going to go ahead and get a string called input and set it equal to in.nextLine. That's the input of the user. Then we're going to say while, and we're going to set up a little while loop here. If you remember from this while loop, if the enemy entered invalid information, we had this final else statement here that said invalid command, and then the loop would reiterate back to the top and just print out the options again. We need to do something similar here, because if we don't validate the input that the user has, we're going to go right back up to the top. So if the user types in something wrong, it won't say invalid command, for example. It would just go straight back up to like fighting a new enemy. So we need to make sure. So we're going to make a while loop, and we're going to basically say, whilst the input the user's providing is not equal to 1 or 2, i.e., while the user isn't inputting valid information, we're just going to keep looping and asking them what they want to do. So we're going to say while the input is not equal to, so equals the exclamation mark, meaning not, of course, while it's not equal to 1, and it's also not equal to 2, then we're going to go ahead and say system.out.println invalid command. And then go ahead and set input equal to in.nextLine. So this validation here, we grab the input that the user's put in. Whilst the input isn't equal to 1 or 2, whilst it's not a valid input, when it's not equal to 1 or 2, we're going to say it's not valid by saying invalid command. Then we're just going to grab the next bit of input they put in and hope that it is valid. So as soon as they enter some valid input, this while loop's going to be moved over, and we can actually get to our options down here. So we can say if input equals 1, go ahead and system.out.println. And then we can say something like, you continue on your adventure. And then we could say else if input dot equals 2 system.out.println. And this is the case. In this case, the user's defeated the enemies and he now wants to exit the dungeon. So this is like the victory screen, basically. So you exit the dungeon from your adventures. And you can add like a score system if you want. Again, this is fully customizable. You can play around with it, add in code you want. I'm just laying down the groundwork for you to use. So I just realized I should have moved that across a long time ago. That's been taking up a lot of space. Okay, so we have our code here. We've done quite a lot so far. We're almost finished, and we can actually see the final thing. So we have the final two options for the users. If they choose to exit, we obviously need to say break. We need to break out of the loop. So this breaks out of this while loop here. And then finally, let me just make sure the brackets are right. So while running, we'll come out of this loop here. And then we're just going to go ahead and say thanks for playing. System.out.println. I'm going to copy this down twice. I'm going to make it look nice with formatting. Just going to add loads of hashes here. And we're going to say thanks for playing. I'm just going to make sure these line up nicely with each other. There we go. So we've got a nice thanks for playing message at the end. And this game is pretty much done. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to run this and we're going to take a look at it. Let's go ahead and drag this right up. So we see welcome to the dungeon. Now, let me actually walk you through the code as we're doing this. So the first things first, I don't need to talk about the variables again. We initialized all those, fairly simple. Welcome to the dungeon prints out, as you can see. And while it begins, the game starts. So system.out.println, we print out, again, just for formatting. So the first thing we do is we randomize the enemy's health, we get a random name for the enemy, and we print it out to the user. We can see that's exactly what's happened. We can see skeleton has appeared, it prints out our HP, which is static at 100 from the start, and the randomized number for the skeleton was 72. Now we're presented with the three options here: attack, drink health potion, and run. Let's test the anomalies first of all before we test the others. If we type in random input, you can see we receive invalid command, and the loop starts again up here. It prints out all of this again. What would you like to do? Let's put in 4, for example. Again, not a valid input. So we need to put in 1, 2, or 3. Let's go ahead and test 1 first of all. We go and hit 1. We can see it randomizes damage dealt, damage taken, and we take away accordingly, and then we print out for the user. So you strike the skeleton for 13 damage, and you receive 5 in retaliation. Then it prints out both of your HP. So let's keep attacking this till one of us dies. So you can see it's still printing out everything we do. So I hit it for 26 damage and received 22. So skeleton was defeated. You have 54 HP left. What would you like to do now? So let's go ahead and continue fighting. Press 1. And then we can see assassin has appeared. So where are we? We're up here. So it's randomized the enemy again. We've printed out everything as usual. Let's go ahead and test our health potion mechanic. So if we press 2, we can see this happens. We drink health potion, healing yourself for 30. You now have 84 HP. Let's just check. Yeah, we had 54, we added 30, and you have 2 left. Let's go ahead and drink health potion. I'll add 30 again, and then go ahead and drink another one. Added 30 again. Let's try and drink another one. We know we don't have any left. It says you have no health potions left. Defeat enemies for a chance to get one. So let's go ahead and run, see what happens. You run away from the assassin, and you can see it's refreshed. We have a new enemy. So we run away from this enemy. We've received a new one. Let's go ahead and attack. And attack again, just to kill it. You see it was defeated. Let's try and get a random health drop. It shouldn't be too hard if we keep just spamming 1. Okay, let's just see what happens when we die then. Okay, here we go. We got the random drop here. So you have 6 HP left. The skeleton dropped a health potion. You now have 1 health potion. So that's our random chance going in. We're probably going to die to this zombie. There we go. So you strike it for that. You receive X amount. You have taken too much damage. You are too weak to go on. You limp out of the dungeon, weak from battle. And then thanks for playing. You see the thanks for playing message at the end. So yeah, that was pretty much the whole game done. I hope everything made sense. You can go back in the video if you missed anything. I don't think I need to recap it all again. Pretty much the hardest parts about this were the conditionals, like the ifs, what if, what input, and then all of this stuff. It's a lot of code to look at, but it really is all quite simple. It's everything we've covered so far. The only things we hadn't covered were these 2 things, but it's fairly straightforward, and you only need to use 1 method from each of them. So yeah, go ahead, take this game, customize it how you want, just play around with it, learn Java by just editing the numbers, seeing what happens. You could add in your own mechanics for this game. It's pretty customizable. I can think of a few things you could do already. You could maybe add validation, so you can't go above 100 health with the health potion. You saw that happened. You could also maybe add a total tally score for how many enemies you've killed, and then print it out at the end here when it says thanks for playing. Those are just a couple of ideas you can do to customize this game a bit. So yeah, go and have fun with that, and I hope you enjoyed this Java series for beginners.